Jaylen Watson has forced 7 incompletions. Trent McDuffie's only forced 1. Right?
Wow.
He just hasn't done that many. So Jaylen Watson's been on a tear, playing either their main outside corner, playing across from Trent McDuffie. I think he's been a lot better than I think most Chiefs fans realize up to this point.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome into this week's edition of KCS Update, a very special edition of KCS Update. No Chiefs game this weekend, so Matt Lane and I are coming to you to talk about the weekend that was, as we were kind of kicking back, relaxing, watching the rest of the NFL beat up on each other, while the undefeated back-to-back champions were on a bye week. Maddie, how was your bye week?
Listen, I was promised that we were about to talk about the crazy Saturday that was in college football. That's how Tucker wrote me in. And then now we're talking about NFL Sunday. It was good. The Chiefs are on a bye week, so it's like a stress-free Sunday. That's always nice. And then, you either feel a little bit better coming out. You watch all these teams that maybe on a normal Sunday you don't get to see everybody. You don't get to creep in and creep out because you're planning your day around the Chiefs games. So this week, you get a chance to see everybody. You get some eyes on some teams that you haven't necessarily got to watch as much so far this year. So you can feel a little better, a little worse about the Chiefs coming out of the bye week. It's always an interesting time of year. This is the earliest bye week the Chiefs had in a while.
I believe it's since 2016 or something like that, off the top of my head. It has definitely been a minute since the Chiefs have had this early bye week, and it kind of comes at a good time for them just because of what they're dealing with, right? Obviously you want it kind of later in the season, but all things considered, I think for the Chiefs right now, with them having to plug in a bunch of new pieces, it comes at a pretty decent time for them. But as you mentioned, Maddie, a week that was electric in the college side of things. Maybe not as electric on the NFL side of things, right? With the way that things went down. There was not a ton of great matchups. Looked about a net football matchup is good. But overall, how do you feel about the Chiefs, the undefeated back-to-back world champions after this week?
I mean, listen, you said it, first of all. This was not the greatest. Even Red Zone was struggling to hit us up this week. We had, 3 one-score games all Sunday, and one of them was the Colts and the Titans. Okay. One of them was the Browns and the Eagles. Really, what are we doing here? And then, you had the one good game with the Ravens and the Commanders going back and forth. That was it. Everything else, in the early game slate wasn't one score. I guess the Broncos and Chargers got close later, but, it just wasn't the most compelling day of NFL football. It wasn't the most compelling day. So, I don't know. You come out of it and, not some good teams looked good. Some bad teams looked bad. Some teams in the middle kind of looked in the middle. I don't know if my stance on where the Chiefs sit in this week really changed a whole lot. I think it's pretty clear over the past few weeks, right, that I think the Ravens are probably right up there with the Chiefs as one of the best teams in the NFL. I'm not as sold on the Texans yet, but they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're winning the games they're supposed to win. They're checking the boxes they're supposed to check. So they're on the outside, I think, but they're looking to slip in there to that top teams club. But I think it's pretty clear for me anyway that the Ravens belong right there with the Chiefs. And outside that, though, NFC or AFC, I think there might be a pretty decent gap between those two teams and maybe the Texans than everybody else.
Yeah, no, I think so too. It's one of those things where I think you made a really good point. There was nothing to really discern from this week of football that you didn't already take into it, right? Your opinion's not changing on the rest of the NFL coming into this week as it was. I kind of relate this to my Missouri football Tigers played UMass, right? Your opinions on the Missouri football Tigers going into that game are probably the exact same coming out of that game, just because there's not a whole lot to take from it. Kind of the same thing for this weekend that was in the NFL. Now, it is fun to see Nick Sirianni chirp his own fans after beating a cursed Browns franchise by 4 points. What is going on there? There's a lot of weird storylines like that. The Bucks obliterate the Saints. Are the Saints broken? The Saints get broken.
That game was on TV here because the Panthers played in the afternoon slate, right? So it was on TV here, and it was actually kind of competitive for a while. And then the Bucks just kind of blew it open there in the second half, I believe it was. So it was kind of going back and forth. The Rattlesnake was in there, right? For the Saints. Spencer Rattler was in there playing. So, the wheels do eventually come off the old Rattlesnake wagon. That thing is not built very sturdy. That thing gets off the rails real fast. I guess like the most surprising thing that stood out to me, the Lions absolutely, waxed the Cowboys. But the Cowboys this year and any year, but especially this year, have been willing to throw complete stinkers out there. I know they're dealing with a good amount of injuries, so I'm not going to read too much into that. But, a little head nod to like, okay, the Lions over there in the NFC still look really good. They're in a very difficult division. Honestly, with the Vikings are still undefeated on a bye week. The Packers still look pretty good. It's like tough division over there. But I still think, again, Ravens, Chiefs right there at the top, then Texans, maybe the Lions, Vikings, like whoever wins the AFC North. I still feel good about the Chiefs, though, and the biggest reason is this, Tuck. They can win it anyway. The Chiefs don't need a game script to win. There's no game script. Now, I get it. The past 2 years, it kind of feels like the Chiefs aren't going to get into a shootout and maybe win a 40-point game, but guess what? They still have Patrick Mahomes. If the time comes that they have to go into a shootout and see if they can win a 40-38, we'll find out. I still feel confident right now saying if it comes to it, they can. We haven't seen them have to very often, but I think they can. There's no game script that gets them out. They're behind 10 points, no big deal. It's a defensive game that's only going to end up, in like the teens, no big deal. It's going to be an efficient offense back and forth. Last team with the ball wins. Again, no big deal. They can win any way they want. Can you say that about any other team in the NFL right now?
I don't think so. And that's why you feel so good coming in to the bye week. And as they come out, the Chiefs, obviously, as I've harped on this podcast already, undefeated back-to-back champions. Look, you don't get to the undefeated spot in the season this deep in the season, week 6 of the NFL season, 5 games, 5-0 on a schedule that is pretty darn tough. Like they didn't play an easy cupcake schedule like, a lot of these SEC teams by week 5 they're 5-0 because they've played a bunch of FCS schools and a bunch of a group of 5 schools. Nope, the Chiefs started off with the Ravens, they started off with the Bengals, they started off with a couple tough NFC teams, and they've been rolling, and you can't roll without some unsung players, Matthew. Like, you cannot get to this level without players outperforming what their role is and outperforming. Look, it's a business, outperforming their contracts. You got to, if you're going to be a very good football team, you have to find value in those areas. Kansas City Chiefs have been able to do that the past, Patrick Mahomes era, basically. So, Matt, we're going to talk about some unsung players because I do think that there are a lot of players that, in our time of podcasting here on KC Sports Network, very limited time windows, I figured we would give a whole podcast dedicated to the guys that might not get their name called a whole lot, but are contributing a whole lot to the team.
I like this. I like this idea. You got to get, because the thing is, we all know the stars, and every week there's a guy here that stands out of there, like those guys get talked about, and then you have Kareem Hunt's coming back. Right? And you talk about him for a while. We all know the different players, the receivers, offensive linemen, but let's get into the guys that we don't talk about as much, that we probably should, that are the parts that are making this team run so smooth, Tuck.
You mentioned a good one there. Kareem Hunt was a guy that kind of came in and maybe stole some shine for some guys. Rightfully so. Not saying that he didn't deserve it, right? Rightfully so. Came in, played really well. He got some airtime from some guys, but maybe Jaylen Watson should be a guy, Matthew Lane, that we should be talking about a little bit more because, look, I'll just tee it up for you, Matty. Coming into the season, we didn't know who cornerback 2 was going to be. And you know what? It didn't look like it was that great of a competition between anyone else. We were still scratching our head coming to the 3rd preseason game when Jaylen Watson is out there and getting toasted by Ty Scott, who's
yikes,
not good. But he's come out there. Ever since the real games have started, he has looked like the real deal.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing. So you go through the entire camp, right? And they're all like, we don't know who this cornerback 2 or 3 is going to be. Jaylen Watson's not participating yet at this point, right? He's not full go. But like in the back of what everyone said, like, well, Jaylen Watson's won this competition the last 2 years against these exact same people. He's been the best when he has been out there on the field. And hey, look, everything that we're seeing or hearing from the team right now is like this competition. No one's taking it. While he's out, it seems like it's set up for him to get it. And then he comes back to that final preseason game and kind of gets beat like a drum. Like it was a bad preseason game. Guess what? The season starts, the regular season starts, and I guess maybe you have to knock off rust. Maybe you have to get in game shape. Maybe live reps matter, Tuck, because since it has started, Jaylen Watson has been targeted 27 times this year. 27 times. He's only given up 14 receptions. That's less than Trent McDuffie. That's less receptions given up than Shamari Connor. It's less receptions given up than, almost anybody that's gotten over 15 targets, right? It's a 52% 52% completion percentage against him, but this is where it gets real good. He has forced 7 incompletions when targeted. So PFF, the way they record that is he either impedes by knocking the ball away or, forces a wide receiver out of bounds or makes it to where they can't get to the football. He actively stops the ball from being completed 7 times. For instance, Trent McDuffie, we all know is great. He's playing great ball this year. He's clearly the Chiefs, second best defensive player, right up there playing with, as good as anybody on the offensive side of the ball. Jaylen Watson has forced 7 incompletions. Trent McDuffie's only forced 1. Right? Wow. He just hasn't done that many. So Jaylen Watson's been on a tear, playing either their main outside corner, playing across from Trent McDuffie. I think he's been a lot better than I think most Chiefs fans realize up to this point.
I agree with that. I think a lot of those fans realize, and kind of more than I expected too. He is kind of outperforming. And we talked about that, that studded class that he came in with. He is outperforming the level that I think a lot of people anticipated for him, and he's been a big reason why you can have Trent McDuffie do so many things, right? L'Jarius Sneed last year was the reason Trent McDuffie could do so many things. You got to always have a guy that can help the versatility of Trent McDuffie. Jaylen Watson's done that. He's played really well, and it's one of those things too where that's a really. And I was kind of surprised, Matty, when you said those numbers about being targeted that many times. It doesn't feel like he's been targeted all that much, but he's doing really well on the times when quarterbacks throw at him. I don't know how you attack this defense. Truthfully, this defense is so rock solid.
And so that's the thing with Watson too is only 2 penalties on the year as well. So you're just not realizing that he's giving up. It doesn't seem like he's targeted that much because he's not giving up any plays, right? We're saying he's given up, what did I say? 14 receptions and 2 penalties, only 16 times. And the majority of those aren't even going to be big plays, right? Only 16 times has he been involved really in a negative play for this defense. The majority of those aren't going to be downfield big things that matter. It'll be something underneath that he has to come up and make a tackle. And so he has been just absolutely exceptional. I was trying to go back and look and see real quick if I could find, because it feels like he's been a guy that has gotten more penalties in the past, but no, not really. He's not that penalized. So he's pretty much just on track with this well. He's excellent job of ball denial. This year, he's making plays in the football. He's not coming down with interceptions, but he's making plays in the football. So, I think he's been huge for this defense. Again, we don't realize it yet. And that last point you said, I don't know how you attack this Chiefs defense. I don't either. They play assignment sound football. They do their jobs. They do what they're supposed to, and they move on. Not many guys outside of Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie sometimes really stand out as doing something special, stand out as doing something great. And I think that's why when we do this kind of thing, when we're looking for unsung heroes, a guy like Jaylen Watson, who's statistically been better than Trent McDuffie, who statistically is one of the better corners in the NFL this year, makes this list, and nobody's really talking about him because it's just everybody just does such a good job of playing their role and doing what they're supposed to on this defense, and it's made it really hard for opposing offenses.
There's some other guys that have also been playing their role, as you mentioned. Look, you mentioned Chris Jones. Chris Jones, stud. Signed him to a huge contract this offseason. Yeah, pretty good at what he does. But there's some complimentary guys around him. Let's talk about Tershawn Wharton, and let's talk about Mike Pennell, because I think both of those guys have been doing really well in their respective roles, right? Because a little bit different for those guys. Mike Pennell has been killing it in the run game. Tershawn Wharton has been getting after the quarterback because, look, if you're going to double Chris Jones, you're going to need guys like Tershawn Wharton, like Mike Pennell, to get after the quarterback, to stop the run. And I think both those guys might not be getting as much attention as they need to at this point in the year.
Well, and they aren't getting as much attention both from fans, but then also on the field, right? There's a reason that Tershawn Wharton's getting a lot of one-on-ones with either centers or guards that are having to kind of slide up in front of him, right? They're going to have to slide into him to block him because they're trying to work either towards Chris Jones to get a double team. They're trying to work over to him. They're trying to where it's split. So Tershawn Wharton, I'm not going to lie. He's getting a lot of very favorable looks, but he is making the most of them, right? And what's great about him, I wrote about him a couple weeks ago on the KCSN Substack. He not only is he winning with the same lateral agility and the explosiveness he always has, he looks bigger and stronger this year. So he's added some power moves to his game. He can get a bull rush to disrupt a blocker and then rip off of that, then counter off of that. He's getting better with this counter rush move. So if something isn't working, he can get to a secondary move. And I think this has made him a lot more dangerous. Now, if you look at just his raw win percentage, I think it's pretty okay. It's not absolutely great, but if you go in and look at Brandon Thorne, who does a great job covering all trenches, I think it was as of 2 weeks ago, at least, I haven't seen the updated version yet, Tershawn Wharton was leading everybody he's charted in like high, like the best category of his sacks, like his high level, the highest tier of difficulty sacks, which is essentially a straight up one-on-one and winning quickly, not due to coverage. Tershawn Wharton was winning, like leading the NFL in that, and Chris Jones was like fourth or something, which is crazy given the amount of attention he gets. But like Wharton's making teams pay for going one-on-one with him over and over again.
And we've always kind of been looking for that, right, Maddie, when you talk about just complimentary guys next to Chris Jones, because you know that Chris Jones is going to get a lot of those doubles, a lot of the attention from the offense. So then in terms of just pass rush in general and just a pass rush play, and you got to have another guy who's going to be able to exploit teams that want to pay extra attention to him. They got it with Tershawn Wharton. And that's been a very great surprise of his development here. I wonder how much you can attribute that to Joe Cullen and then the defensive line development, of Joe Cullen, and just kind of how they've been able to take steps. I think, look, ever since Joe Cullen came in, Tershawn Wharton's been taking a lot of big steps. I mean, even last year he was playing pretty well on the interior as well. But and Mike Pennell is one of those guys where I think maybe I didn't give the move as much credit. Nate Taylor was talking about this on Only Weird Games when they brought up Mike Pennell. Oh, I think it was towards the end of the year last year, right? When they signed him to the active roster.
Playoffs.
Playoffs, yeah. And then all of a sudden, now you're seeing this really dominant run defense from the Kansas City Chiefs. And
yeah,
it almost feels like it's a correlation to Mike Pennell.
Listen, Mike Pennell was great last year in the playoff run, and then I think he has been this year. I think our last post-game show, I gave him kind of my post-game segment because I was like, listen, I'm watching and like, there's a dude in here. He's just sitting here. He is eating up double teams. He is taking on as many blockers as they want to send out of me, and he is allowing. But Chris Jones is playing his best he ever has against the run. Tershawn Wharton's actually been disruptive versus the run. Like, he's not a super strong anchor. He's been disruptive. But when you have these three techs that get to shoot gaps and play next to a nose tackle who is going to hold his space, who's going to hold up multiple blockers, who's going to allow your linebackers to run free, it's a lot easier to get aggressive when you play next to that guy. It's a lot easier for your linebackers to run blitz. It's a lot easier for these penetrating defensive tackles to shoot into the backfield and make plays. So Mike Pennell's not getting any of the stats. I love that he got a sack while laying down on the ground. I think that's perfect. I think that's karma. That's positive karma for Mike Pennell, who's not getting the tackle stats. He's not getting the tackles for loss stats that everybody else is, but they're just benefiting off of Big 69, just sitting there in the middle, just eating everybody up in the line of scrimmage. So, like, I am so glad we were talking about him because I do think he's been a huge part of this Chiefs like run defensive turnaround.
And part of this is, too, you mentioned, not a stat sheet stuffer. I got to try to say that 5 times fast. So a lot of these guys that we're talking about with unsung heroes, there's not a lot of stats to talk about when it's a lot of anecdotal evidence or what we're seeing on the film or what we're seeing while these games are playing out. And that's what being an unsung guy is, right? You're not going to see the number. The big numbers aren't going to be as flashy, but look, I mean, Mike Pennell's as unsung as it gets, I think. I think that's a good one as we sneak on our list. We got to talk about the offensive side of the ball too, Maddie, but got to take a break.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Welcome back here to KCSN Update, a special edition of KCSN Update. Maddie Lane and I hanging out, talking about some unsung heroes for the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, Maddie, this offense maybe has not lived up to expectations as we anticipated it to be. But look, still scoring more points than the other team at the end of the day. That's all that matters. There's been some unsung heroes on there we mentioned earlier. Kareem Hunt came in, had a lot of attention. He took a little bit of the attention off of maybe one of the reasons he is playing really well is because they got the best offensive lineman in the league in Creed Humphrey.
Oh, yeah. And listen, Creed Humphrey, another guy that gets paid, right? Another guy getting a little bit of money. And guess what? He's making the absolute most of it. He's been phenomenal for the Chiefs. And like, this is an unsung hero that I don't think if you ask anybody or any Chiefs fan or anybody around the league, like, hey, how do you think Creed Humphrey's playing? Everyone's going to say that he's playing great, but I think he might even be playing better than what people are saying, right? Like, he's been one of my biggest things all offseason, right? I'm going a slight mini tangent. Trey Smith is an interesting thing that the Chiefs have to figure out because a lot of their run game is based around Trey Smith. A lot of their run game is about either him pulling or him down blocking to allow somebody else to pull to come around and him making the plays. Or when they do zone stuff, they're really trying to get him to create movement to allow someone to get to the second level. It's very Trey Smith-centric. It still is a lot this year, But I think you're starting to see a lot more of it but be based around Creed Humphrey a little bit. And it's not in the same ways, but they're getting him on the move more. They're trying to get him just, if there's a chance for him to free climb to the second level, he's just taking off. It's no longer about trying to get like these big combo blocks and work with a Trey Smith. It's just like, oh, Creed, you're really athletic. You can just go take off and do it. So there is a slight shift in how this like run game is centered not around just Trey Smith anymore, but also Creed Humphrey. So not only is he playing good, but the way the Chiefs have designed their run game is kind of like worrying just as much about how he's doing as much as it has been Trey Smith. So those two working next to each other has been great. It's been nice to see Creed get a little boost, still be one of the best, offensive linemen, if not the best offensive lineman in the entire NFL right now.
Maddie, a question I have as we kind of been 5 weeks into the season now. Joe Thuney, another year older, coming off of a pec injury. Do you think Creed Humphrey's having to do a little bit more with kind of how Joe Thuney has been maybe recovering from a pec injury? Look, that's not an easy injury for an offensive lineman, especially, as I mentioned, he is a little bit older of an offensive lineman. A pec injury is a muscle that you use a whole lot as an offensive lineman. And do you think he's having to work maybe
a little bit? Find out, you do have to use it a lot.
Right. I think he's having to do a little bit more than maybe was anticipated this season.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. It's hard to tell, right? Because the way offensive line play is going to work so much is it's like you're making your protection calls based on the alignment and what the pass concept is going to be. So you can't really protect a guard as much as you can protect a center, right? So like it's a little bit more difficult to protect a guard. And let's also be clear, Trey Smith isn't the most consistent in pass protection. So it's not like you can just leave him, completely isolated the majority of the times. He'll always help Joe Thuney. And we'll say though, this is like the first year since Joe Thuney's been here that you're not looking at the Chiefs interior offensive lineman and going, the left guard's the guy. Creed's clearly the guy this year, but I think Thuney's almost back to where he's kind of getting close to that level of Trey Smith. A little more consistent, a little bit more, stable, rep in and rep out, but the highs aren't there. And we've seen a few times now where Thuney's kind of been walked back or he hasn't been able to reach a block that he needs to. And I do think that puts a little bit more pressure on the other guys to say, okay, we have to win every single rep we can now. We no longer can just guarantee our left guards never lose. It's going to happen occasionally, not a lot. And I don't mean to say that Thuney's been bad, but you no longer can just go ahead and chalk up that your left guard's not losing this rep. So that might mean your center, who's usually a little bit more free, has a little bit, not completely free, but like he's got a little bit more fluidity to his assignments, might have to make sure that he's on his A game. And so far, Creed Humphrey has been.
You mentioned the interesting nature of Trey Smith. They got a really interesting decision coming up with just their guards in general. Joe Thuney, 31, almost 32. November 18th is his birthday. He turns 32. He's obviously on that big contract, but there is they can get out of it. He's got the 2025 season and 2026. He's an unrestricted free agent. Cap hit of $26 million next year, almost $27 million, 26.9 for him. It is a lot. It is a $2 million of 2025 salary, fully guarantees up to the third league day of 2025 too. I'm just seeing this in the contract notes. But how do they approach this is going to be really interesting because Trey Smith is going to command a lot in this market as well. Might just be a wait and see type of deal. I might just have to play this one out, and that's never been historically great for the Chiefs as they wait for contracts to pay out. When you think of it with Justin Houston, Eric Berry too, needing those contracts to play out. They did not, I don't want to say win, but the team themselves did not benefit from signing those major contracts. But we'll see how it goes. The offensive line.
I think he's got to play it by ear because, if Joe Thuney comes out of this bye week, or especially the latter half of this year, and he looks more like the guy he was last year pre-injury, then you have an entirely different conversation. But if it trends the same way it has now, and again, I want to be very clear, Joe Thuney has not been terrible or anything like that. No. But he's clearly taken a step back this year, right? He's clearly not as good. Are the Chiefs really going to lose Trey Smith, who is younger? They're playing about the same level, just in entirely different ways. Are they going to really risk losing him and having to replace him to keep Thuney on that contract just to have to replace Thuney in 2 more years? Now you're going to have to replace your 2 offensive guards with unknowns, and you're not even getting elite guard play out of Thuney anymore. That said, if you do go that route, you still would have to eat, I think, $10 million in dead cap to cut Thuney this year, which isn't impossible. It's not so much that you can't have this conversation. It's just worth noting that, I think the way the rest of this year plays out specifically for Thuney might kind of dictate what you have to do. Because if he doesn't play elite anymore and you're just getting good, offensive guard play instead of elite, you might have to really have that conversation about not wanting to lose both Trey Smith and have a, step back at that left guard going forward.
You do have, now we're talking roster construction here. With this, I do like the point that you brought up that Trey Smith is younger, and you would basically be just shifting that contract right of the Tooney contract over to the other side of the guard. And then you have drafted Kingsley Suamataia if you do want to try to move him to guard. You have drafted some other guys that you could, maybe Wanya Morris wants to be the guard instead. I don't know. But you've got options. You could draft a guard to put there that could be on a young rookie contract necessarily. So you're still kind of in the same situation that you were. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, especially with how the season does play out, as you mentioned, because both of them could play at a very incredible high pro level, all pro level, and they could be stuck. And you know what? I want to throw this guy in here, Maddie. We're talking about the offense. We're talking about playing at all pro levels. That may not apply to this guy, but Justin Watson has been doing some really good stuff for the Chiefs. It might not show up on the stat sheets. He might not be hauling in all these catches. He might not be making all the highlight plays. He might not be swiping the key card to go to the penthouse, but he is putting in work out there, and I love his effort in the running game. That's what I love about Justin Watson.
Justin Watson, man, I have no complaints about Justin Watson at all. I think he's definitely an unsung hero because this is a guy that's put out there for probably way more reps than a Justin Watson level player should have to play. And given, especially with the Chiefs' injuries, right? Justin Watson's having to play real, important active roles for this team. He is essentially their only wide receiver who runs intermediate routes.
Yeah.
You can even go back to when Rashee Rice was still playing. Justin Watson is still kind of their only wide receiver who runs intermediate routes. Xavier Worthy runs deep or at the line of scrimmage. McCole Hardman deep or at the line of scrimmage. Rashee Rice was mostly underneath stuff. Juju Smith-Schuster occasionally drifts up past 10 yards, but that's only because the zone's open there. That's it. Justin Watson is their intermediate wide receiver. And by the way, because you have Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice and Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson's also the guy they throw out there just be sacrificing to being pressed a billion times on the backside of plays when they go 3-by-1. He has such a unfun role for a wide receiver that is clearly a role player for a team. They essentially have him do all the stuff that you would have a legitimate number one X wide receiver do, and he's obviously not going to produce crazy stats with that, but once or twice a game, he comes up with a nice big play over the middle of the field, usually in the intermediate range, and that's the one pass or one completion they make to a wide receiver there. So it's just, he plays such an important role. Obviously, we like to have a better player there, but while the guys they have right now, he's doing it because nobody else can.
He's a hard hat and lunch pail guy. He's good. He's going to do the dirty work. He's going to get in there. He's your garbage man. He's going to do the job that nobody else wants to do because he's going to get in there. He's going to clean up the trash. He's going to take out the trash. He's going to do the hard stuff, the run blocking, the Maddie, I don't know if you know the stat off the top of your head. The dude's running all kinds of routes and not getting targets, right? The dude is out there doing cardio, not getting targeted, but doing what he needs to do to help these other guys get open for the betterment of the team. That is a guy that you love to have on your football team. And you do mention, you would love to see some production from that position, obviously, right? You would like to see that. But a guy who I feel knows his role. He knows what he is there to do, and he does his role so well. And look, the reason Justin Watson's on this team is because maybe Justin Ross doesn't really know where to line up to run that position. And it's kind of an indictment on the guys that they have on the practice squad rather than Justin Watson himself. Justin Watson himself is a football player, and I think he does a role very good, very well. And look, you need guys like that. You need role players. You need guys that will go out there and do the dirty work. That's why I think Justin Watson, unsung, he's a garbage man. That's what he is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, he would have a role on 31 NFL teams, right? There's almost no team wouldn't be able to find a use for him. The Chiefs have just found themselves in a situation over the past 2-3 years where they probably need him more than they should. And I think that makes fans not appreciate him because, to your point, he is going to do this. He was more than willing to do the stuff that no other receiver really wants to. And then now when you need him to do to do more, he's like, fine, I'll do it. I'll go do everything that you guys want me to do. And we'll do it fine. We'll do it. We'll do whatever needs to be done. Even though, maybe it's a little more than we should have to ask from any, one player, especially a guy of, his caliber.
Maddie, final question for you.
Oh, hit me.
It is. We're recording this Sunday, October 13th.
Yeah, that's what they say. It's not a Friday, but yes.
Not a Friday. It's a Sunday. What do the Kansas City Chiefs pick at 32?
Ooh, buddy. We got a long way to go to figure this one out. I think, you know what, Tuck? I like this question. This is a good question. You know what we're going to do? We're going to put a pin in this. We're going to talk about this on the KC Laboratory Show on Monday. You know, you guys are probably hearing this Monday morning, Monday midday. Tonight, you got to tune into the lab. Because I think we got some draft talk coming. It smells like draft talk. It doesn't smell like fall. It smells like draft talk in the air, Tuck.
It does. Look, I know on the bye week, I was able to push you back all the way to Monday to get you to talk about the draft.
Let's go.
But I'm running a mock draft simulator right now, and you need to talk me off the ledge of drafting Isaiah Bond at 32, because look, if you get Isaiah Bond and Xavier Worthy on the same team, oh my, wow, the Texans just offered me a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and a future 2nd and 6th for 31.
The hardest part about doing a mock draft simulator right now is staring at Isaiah Bond, staring at Evan Stewart, staring at all these other 5'10", 5'11", 180-pound wide receivers, and trying to convince myself that the Chiefs really can't take another one. But by golly,
they will.
But by golly, if I don't want to shoot from the hip, because like those are some of the most fun names to put in there. If I had to make a guess at this point, now, if I had to guess, I think they're going D-line. I think the way this draft shakes out, there will be a D tackle or an edge player that falls there, and we know how they like the value. That said, I don't think this draft is that good. So like this is like a low-key pitch to say, hey, maybe you don't need both 3rd-round picks. Maybe you don't need that 4th-round pick this year because the draft ain't that good. Maybe those picks should go, I don't know, to the Carolina Panthers, who are just spinning their wheels in some mud right about now.
Some names you could potentially watch for: Jack Sawyer. I like that guy. That guy's fun.
Oh, big Jack Sawyer guy.
I don't know if he fixed the Spags type. I haven't looked at like his measurements or anything like that, but like
plays like it.
He does. I like him. Princely from Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Couple names for you guys to pencil in.
Speaking of Ole Miss, I'm a big Walter Nolan guy.
Okay, yeah.
Transferred in there from Texas A&M. I watched him, and like he's similar to like he's like a cross between Pennell and Turk Wharton, right? Like he's got the explosiveness to be the penetrating guy that can play, that can give you some pass rush, but I also think he's really good versus the run. And so like he doesn't load up. It's college is weird too, but like he doesn't load up on the stat sheet. But I think he gets a lot of plays on the interior for that Ole Miss team right now and let some of these other guys go. So like I'm a big Walter Nolan fan. I think that's kind of like his range is probably around there at the end of round 1. So yeah, he's the guy I got my eyes on.
There you go. There's a little bit of teaser for you. A little teaser, an active teaser, if you will, for some draft talk potentially on the KC Laboratory side if you're listening to this. But that's going to do it for this special edition of KCSN Update. Short and sweet, just how you like it. We'll be back. Hang Time supposedly is going to be out on your feeds shortly. KC Laboratory, as we mentioned, live at 8 p.m. on Monday night. Go check that out. For Maddie Lane, I'm Tucker Franklin. We'll catch you next time.